Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Just out walking Lulu right now. Say hi, Lulu. Bringing a sort of different video to my channel today. For those curious, this is not my typical kind of YouTube video, and this is definitely not a sign of me trying to take my channel in a different direction. I still intend to do movie-based content and everything for this channel, but this is a video that at the time that I'm filming it, I've been sort of planning out for, I guess you could say, the better part of a year. If I'm playing my cards right, at the time that I'm uploading this, it is Mental Health Day, and I guess you could say it was roughly around the time of Mental Health Day last year that the seed for this video was planted, because mental health has definitely had a major part in my life in the last few years. There have been situations in the last few years that have forced me to have to develop a sense of perspective and appreciation for life as it goes, both with the good and the bad, and being able to be honest with myself about when I was wrong, and just learning to be a more honest and direct person. So I guess you can call this a sort of deep personal dive, if you will, into my journey with mental health. But because I've been planning this out for a year, it's given me time to really reflect on what I actually want to talk about, because I mean there's definitely some cobwebs I want to get out of the closet and really just be upfront with the whole journey, if you will. Now, why am I filming some of this while walking my dog? Well, as I said, this is a video about mental health, and it's often when I am walking my dog that often I will find myself delving into the deep crevices of my mind, if you will, as far as where my journey of mental health has taken me. And it's really through moments like walking my dog where I'm able to develop that sense of perspective and appreciation for the life lessons I've earned because of my difficulties with mental health. There's been moments throughout my life where I have to reevaluate the good and the bad about myself, because life is not always about what you like about yourself. I've had moments in the last few years that I'm not proud of, but hey, for me to grow as a person, I need to be upfront about those situations. I also want to talk about my healing, because for the better part of 3 years now, I've been on this continuous journey of self-healing, so there's definitely going to be a lot to dive into, but hey, it's given me much earned life lessons that I'm holding near and dear to this day. It is time for me to get those moments out in the open and just clear the air, be upfront about the person I am these days and where those bad situations have taken me. So I hope you'll stick around with me. Let's get the journey started. So where does my real journey with mental health begin? Well, that's difficult to say because there's several facets of it. I definitely think I'm OCD. Not that I've ever been diagnosed with it, but I've definitely been a real perfectionist throughout my life. I know perfectionism doesn't necessarily mean OCD, but nonetheless, I also look at myself as somebody who doesn't always adapt well to change. I've had moments throughout my life where I almost felt maybe perhaps I could be bipolar. Some of the symptoms that I feel I could relate to, I mean, I'm not necessarily doing research on, it's just me being expressive about my feelings and how they come across. Another thing to keep in mind is I also have Asperger's syndrome, which I didn't find out I had till I was in high school, and I actually did go to a psychologist for a time while I was in high school. I stopped going to him around my sophomore year of high school, which for a while I wasn't even sure why, until finally about a year or so ago, just out of curiosity, I asked my mom, and she said my insurance was no longer covering the session, so that's why I had to stop going. Now, in the time since, have I done any sort of pursuing of anything therapy-wise? No, because a lot of the moments that definitely sum up my mental health journey, if you will, I really have just been looking inside myself and just reevaluating those situations to the point where I feel like I'm just kind of seeking the answers within myself. That's sort of been a weird trick I've discovered, at least with my own mental health. You know, sometimes the answers are right inside of you. I know that's not always the case with anybody, and for what it's worth, I would never call myself, you know, a expert on psychiatric help or anything. No, I am not a therapist. I am not a psychiatrist. I am none of that. If you feel you need to go out and pursue therapy or whatever to find the answers you need to bring peace to yourself, please do it. What I do for myself may not necessarily be for you. But in the last like three and a half years now, I've just been on this continuous journey with self-healing. And it's been an ongoing thing because I've had some very bad episodes over the years that have definitely forced me to reevaluate myself, because if I continued on that path, only the powers that be know where I would be right now. Now, what have been some of the more underlying themes throughout my journey with mental health? Well, a lot. I definitely think I've always been sort of a guy who sort of marched to the tune of his own drum. I've never been a trendy kind of guy. I try to get into trends and either it just doesn't last long, or a couple exceptions that even sort of did not click well with my mental health. Like for instance, back in 2020, I tried diving a little more into like politics or whatever, at least in terms of what I was posting on social media, just because I felt that's what I had to do at the time. But that conflicted very heavily with my mental health at the time. And after that 2020 election, I just said after that, I'm not getting into politics anymore. That's it. I'm not saying that I don't care about what's going on in the world right now. I do care. But you know what? I also have to make necessary decisions for myself. If I want to keep myself in check as far as my mental health goes, and I just decided after 2020, no more politics for me. That was it. And I just kind of go my own way since then. But even still, there's even other facets where I've never been like a trendy kind of guy. I'm not the biggest video gamer. I'm not the biggest movie watcher in terms of newer movies. I never really got into like the MCU or whatever. I know a lot of people like
like that. The only MCU movie I've seen, at least of the ones that have come out in the past decade, is the first Avengers. Even growing up, I wasn't a sports kind of guy. My dad's a big sports lover. He used to play softball and everything, but he put me in t-ball when I was in like first grade, and I just couldn't get into it. I was out there in my own little world, and I know some people could say, well, you were a little kid then, but even if you threw me out in a baseball field now, I'd probably be the same person just because I can't connect with it well. Now, truth be told, I had low blood count as a kid, so because of that, I was not able to participate in physical sports a lot as a kid. But even if that hadn't been the case, I don't think it would have made much of a difference because, you know, I just wasn't a sports kind of kid. My brother was into Pokemon when we were kids, and I got briefly into it because he was into it, but it didn't last long for me. We went and saw the first movie in theaters. I had some cards that I got from my brother, but you know what? It doesn't resonate with me for some reason. And I'm sure for a lot of people, you might notice that with my content. I mean, listen, I'm not saying anybody was asking me to do a video about a Canadian VHS of Frankenstein or whatever, but you know what? That's something I want to do. Even if it just reaches a small audience, that's fine because that's who I want to connect with. I want to connect with the small group of people who say, oh yeah, that interests me too. Those are the topics of movies that interest me. Anybody can come on here and do a full-fledged movie review about their favorite movie. And you know, I've had ideas about doing that, but at the same time, I could sit here all day and talk about Frankenstein, Jaws, Never Ending Story, or RoboCop, the movies themselves. I can talk about that all day, but there's other facets that I just feel like don't get talked about. And that's partly why I've used my YouTube channel as an example to be able to be expressive about those little things that interest me. Even going back to my childhood, I had very eclectic interests even as a kid, and I'm sure down the line it played heavy roles in my mental health and everything because it definitely causes a bit of a divide in terms of the people who I've been trying to connect with over the years, because a lot of the people that I was trying to associate with are more into current things, where it's like I'm more into the older things. And again, that's not things that were just pushed on me, that's just the way I became interested in things. My mom had Frankenstein on VHS. At 4 years old, I wanted to watch that tape. Not because my mom sat me in front of the TV and said, watch this movie. No, I, at 4 years old, wanted to watch this movie because I wanted to watch it. Even doing this mental health video, like nobody's asking me to do a mental health video. Why am I doing a mental health video? Because I want to do a mental health video. There's been so much in my journey with mental health that I don't like talking about, but at the same time, I'm excited to talk about because, you know, let's say I really take this YouTube thing seriously. I don't want past experiences to come creeping in later on, turning me into something that I'm not these days. You know, listen, I was a very different person a few years ago. It was me at my darkest hour. It was me in a very betrayal kind of state of mind. I betrayed some friends. I betrayed myself, and it's just not a version of myself I ever want to have any sort of association with ever again if I expect to have a clean and clear conscience and mental health going forward. So what are some actual specific moments throughout my life that are definite highlights of my mental health? There's a lot. I would say my real journey with mental health probably began when my hormones kicked in. That was roughly around the age of 12. And one thing that I have noticed that has been a recurrence throughout my mental health journey and my emotional journeys, if you will. If I'm physically attracted to somebody, I've noticed that a lot of times when those feelings intensify, a lot of rage brews out of it. And I find myself in these weird stages, not so much recently, but definitely when I was a teenager and definitely in my 20s, that I will build up this rage where I just want to have some type of beef or anger to distill upon this person, even if they didn't do anything wrong. Where does that come from? I don't know. It's just rage. You know, it's going back to what I was saying earlier. Maybe I'm bipolar. I have this side of me that's just has a very strong inferiority complex in regards to other people, that it creates this very big defensive and angry projection, if you will, that is just knee deep in insecurities that I am just not able to deal with. And this happened with many people over the years. You know, I had a crush on a girl when I was in middle school, and the girl I had a crush on in middle school, as well as the girl I had a crush on in high school, one of the things they both had in common was that they were both teachers' pets. Maybe that was just my type at the time. I kind of went for the smarter girls. I don't know. I mean, yes, later on I kind of found myself going for more the attractive types. Like there was these two girls who were seniors when I was a freshman in high school who, yeah, I had a crush on at the time, but I was 14. I thought to myself, they're 18, gonna graduate, they're in relationships, I'm not gonna act on that. Years later, when I'm 18, they're in their early 20s, and I knew they were single, I thought, maybe I'll act on this now. That didn't pan out well later on, and I know a lot of the reason why that didn't pan out later on was because I was just very knee-deep in emotional instability at the time. But to go back to the girl I had a crush on in middle school, as far as I know, she still doesn't like me to this day, which I think is stupid, because I mean, this is all stems from a crush I had on her when I was 13, and I've only sporadically seen her over the years. Like, I remember when I was in high school, I tried reconnecting with them on Facebook, and they cut me off. Fast forward about 8 years ago when I joined Twitter for the first time, it gave me a list of suggested people. Funny enough, one of the people that popped up was her, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I mean, it's been, what, 10 years now? it should be a water under the bridge at this point. Let's just let it go. And I thought to myself, you know what? I don't have to talk to this person. I don't have to interact with this person. I thought, just follow them and go about your business. So I did that. Skip maybe 2 weeks later. I just thought, you know what? Let me see what that person's up to, just out of curiosity. I found their profile and it said that they blocked me. And I just thought, really? Because of the damn crush I had on you when I was 13, that just, I've long been past at this point, but whatever. And it's kind of the same with my high school crush as well. I mean, yes, I've crushed on quite a few people from my high school years, but like the person who I really had a crush on at the time, you know, she was an odd one. I mean, she had a very weird sense of humor. I mean, she was the first person I became friends with when I went to high school, because keep in mind, when I went to high school, I pretty much was joining a bunch of new faces. I didn't know any of these people at the time. So the fact that I became friends with like a girl at the time, I didn't really have a lot of close female friends at the time. And we had some nice conversations. I'm not going to say we didn't. I mean, we had some nice phone conversations like very early on in freshman year. But again, just my Asperger's syndrome, my insecurities, I'm developing these feelings, but it's also boiling this rage that just wants to be against this person because I just think it's just not real. This person's a fake. It was not meant to work out later on. To the point that that person and I pretty much don't talk anymore. I do occasionally see them at the store I work at. They shop there, but they never say hi to me. They don't talk to me, and I just keep my distance. And it's fine. I mean, I've been well over her since 2013, 2014. It's been well over a decade. Now, has that rage really been in me recently? Not so much, because at the same time, I haven't really been crushing on anybody lately, but at the same time, I also feel because I've been much more self-conscious of my mental health in the last few years, it's been numbing that down, so to speak. At least I hope it is. In terms of my emotional feelings and everything, you know, I definitely feel like my 30s has been the most controlled period of my life in that regards. I mean, it was definitely not in control when I was a teenager. I was not a very happy teenager. I wasn't very happy in my 20s either. And it's not necessarily to say that like in those times, like I didn't have any reasons to be happy. No, I mean, I've led a pretty happy home life and everything. I mean, listen, do I have a perfect home life? No, who does? I mean, my parents split when I was 2, so I pretty much spent my entire life with them separated. So I know it's not like something that emotionally scarred me like from that or anything. I never grew up thinking, I wish I had different parents. I wish I was richer or something like that. I was always very content with the way I was living my life throughout those years, as I am now. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's definitely changes I need to make in my life now, mostly because I'm not getting any younger. I'm 32. I need to make certain choices both with myself, you know, for my well-being and everything, and for my future ahead. But yeah, keeping my mental health in check is definitely high on that list. Now, one specific aspect I can say about my mental health is every aspect of it has always been purely emotional. I've never been drunk or high on my life, so I know that never played a role in these mental episodes I've had throughout my life. I mean, that's a personal choice for me. I mean, listen, I'm not going to make this a PSA about don't drink or don't drug or whatever. Listen, my dad's a heavy smoker. My mom likes to have her glass of wine and everything, but no, I just don't indulge in that. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I mean, I always say, hey, do it in moderation. Don't make it a habit or an addiction, because if you do, it's not going to end well for you later on. But as far as like don't do it at all, I mean, that's a decision you have to make for yourself. I just feel I can live a much healthier and prolonged life if I just don't indulge in that. I mean, listen, I'm not saying that I don't have any health risks. I'm not the healthiest person in the world, but especially with my mental health, you know, I just feel it's just best for myself to not indulge in those kinds of things. Because I'm also conscious of the fact that, you know what, if I had been under that influence during many of these mental episodes that I've had, I can only imagine how much worse it would have been if I had been under the influence of something. So that is one thing that I do sort of pat myself on the shoulder for in terms of my mental health. I've never been drunk or high, and I intend to keep it that way. But as I said before, yes, they were all very emotional. You know, when I was in middle school, I was bullied a lot. I remember in 8th grade, I had kids throwing stuff at me on the bus. A lot of the kids I had to sit with at the lunch table, they thought I was gay. I was reading the Harry Potter books at the time, and people used to call me Harry Pothead. Yeah, not a fun time for me. I mean, high school wasn't always fun either, but if I had to choose between middle school and high school, I will definitely pick high school. Even to the point, let's paint a picture for a second. Let's say you were going to ask me, you have the option, both years of middle school, but I can change it, while I can redo all 4 years of high school, but I can't change it. Now I know what you're saying. It should be the other way around, right? It should be both years of middle school that I can't change, while it's 4 years of high school that I can change. No, I'm sticking with my first option. Here's why. Middle school was such an unpleasant experience for me that by comparison, even if I had to relive all 4 high school years the way they happened, and listen, there is a fuck ton of shit that went on in my high school years that I wish I could change. But even that aspect aside, I would much rather relive the 4 years of high school as is, flaws and all, than relive 2 proportionately better years of middle school. Because that's how much I did not like my years of middle school. Because there was more beyond it than just me being bullied. I wasn't fond of some of the things I was learning there. I wasn't fond of some of the teachers I had there. There was just some things about that school that just made it a very unpleasant experience for me. And yes, I could definitely admit that a lot of my emotional feelings at the time were not helping me in those times as well. So some of it was just
beyond the stuff that was around me. A lot of it was internal as well. Yes, I had a crush on the girl in middle school, but I had a large instability within me in terms of how I was handling those feelings. I'm not the best with handling my emotional feelings on those levels. And yes, has it often led to some very sus moments on my part? Yes, and I do apologize for that, and that's a big reason why I've had to embark on this journey of mental health. I mean, listen, I'd be the first to admit that I'm a socially awkward person. I always will be. I have Asperger's syndrome. It does plague certain aspects of my behaviors that I'm not proud of, behaviors that I'm definitely taking more control of these days because it's not the kind of behavior that I want to be associated with. And how have I been in the last few years? I mean, I definitely think in the past 3 years, it's been a minor improvement over the other. I mentioned before how, you know, my teen years were not very happy. My 20 years were not that happy. I mean, they were very mentally challenging times in my life. But just to kind of touch on where I have been recently, 29, I definitely think was much better than 28, even though 29 was a very depressing period for me. 30, I would say was better than 29. 31, I liked better than 30. My 30s have been about average on the whole, if I had to be honest. Do I deal with stress? Of course. When I have too much stress, I have these really bad mental spasms and everything. But as far as like where I was off the spectrum a few years ago, no, nothing nearly like that. But every year changes. So, I mean, every year I feel like I gain a little, I lose a little, but you know, I've been on a more or less steady path so far in my 30s, and I'm trying to keep it that way as best as I can. Another large lesson I've had to learn is how to say you're sorry, how to really say you're sorry, because there's different areas of that I had to come to terms with as well. I used to be the kind of person where, like, let's say I had a falling out with somebody, I would say I'm sorry, let some time pass, maybe let a few months go by, maybe even a year go by, and then I would try to reach out to this person and realize that, you know what, no, nothing was healed, at least in terms of where I wanted it to be healed. And I've done that with a few people over the years. I mean, it's been a long time since I've done that. I can't honestly remember the last time I did that, but like the person I am these days would not do that. For instance, 2-3 years ago, I actually took it upon myself to reach out to like specific people from aspects of my life. Most of them were people from like high school, to just say I'm sorry and say like, hey, listen, I know the last time we talked, I was going through a very bad mental period at the time, and I know that is what ended our whatever. And I just want to say I'm sorry, and I do hope wherever you are these days, you're doing good and you're happy and all that. Most of the time, I got no replies from these people. A couple of them even blocked me, and it's fine. I'm at the point now where, as far as I'm concerned, I don't have anything else to say. I just said I'm sorry. This isn't something where I'm trying to reopen the friendships or whatever. I'm just here to say I'm sorry and just walk, because that's the biggest lesson I've had to learn in saying you're sorry. Sorry is not about the pursuit of forgiveness. When you say you're sorry, it's not about, hey, can we fix this? It's about, I did something wrong, or I felt I did something wrong. I feel I owe that to you to say I'm sorry. If you don't forgive me, okay, you don't forgive me. I mean, that's your decision to make, not mine. And same with forgiveness. You know, forgiveness does not always offer you a gateway into that person's life again, depending on the situation. It can, but don't expect that to be a guarantee every time. And I've definitely had moments where I've said I'm sorry to somebody, and I would let time pass and I realize that the beef is still there. Why is the beef still there? I said I'm sorry. It's the other person's decision to keep the beef alive. You have to respect that, even if you don't agree with the reasons for why they do it. Unfortunately, that's a shitty aspect of life, but it happens. There's just some very stubborn people in the world. I've been a stubborn person. I mean, listen, when I say I've dealt with stubborn people in my life, that doesn't mean that I don't think that I'm not stubborn. I'm a very stubborn person. I would say a good percentage of my mental health journey is due to my stubbornness and just not wanting to take no for an answer. You can't be that kind of person. It's not going to end well for you. So these days, if I say I'm sorry, I am apologizing for what I did, and I will leave it at that. If that person wants to reach out to me again after that, that's their decision. And I try to be as clear as I can with my apology. I don't say I'm sorry you felt that way. I try to acknowledge what I did wrong. I mean, one of those people I reached out to a couple years ago from high school to say I was sorry, they were the only person who wrote back to me, and they said, well, I didn't ask you to apologize. Sometimes it's not always about whether you asked me to apologize or not. If I feel I did something wrong, whether you want me to apologize or not, I'm going to apologize. If they don't forgive me or they don't care about the apology, well, whatever. That doesn't mean I take back the apology. I stand by my apologies, but I'm not going to act like if I say I'm sorry, it's just my bullshit way of saying, hey, I just want to be friends again. I say I'm sorry and I leave it at that. But I just want to kind of skip ahead now. I mean, listen, I could talk all day about the mentally straining days of high school, and trust me, those were mentally challenging days. But I think the real mentally challenging moments began in my 20s, at least the moments that have shaped me more into the person that I try to be these days. When I turned 20, I was in college at the time. I just started working. I mean, balancing work and school was an adjustment for me at the time. It was around that time that my mom and my then stepdad had separated and eventually divorced, which admittedly kind of caught me off guard at the time, even though I will admit now there was always sort of a part of me that was kind of hoping they might split one day. My former stepdad, he was a weird guy. When I first met him, I wasn't really particularly fond of him. What exactly was I not fond of? I mean, it's hard to tell.
I mean, it's not because like another guy's in my mom's life. Listen, she dated a few guys before him, and most of them were guys that I liked. One of them was this dude she knew back from college or high school who was living in Boston, and she wanted to marry him, and we were going to move out there with him, and that's a whole nother story for another time. Although part of that story might actually play into part into something I'm going to talk about later on. But as far as my now ex-stepdad, I don't know. When I first met him, he just seemed like an odd-looking guy. I mean, it's funny, even years later, my dad was saying to me, I think your mom could have done better than him. As the years went on, I started to develop reasons to not be particularly fond of him. He was a little bit stubborn. He was a little bit antagonistic at times. You know, like we would talk about music and I would say I like this or I don't like that. And he would be like, oh, well, I think that's awesome. And he had some condescending moments. Like it actually got kind of bad the last few months before they eventually decided to split. For instance, the last Christmas we had with him, around that time, my mom had asked him to go get a Christmas tree. But when she got home, she saw him laying on the couch watching TV and she didn't see the tree. So she asked him, she's like, did you get a tree? And he looked at her and said, do you see a tree? And another moment that I really feel he crossed the line with me personally was around that time my semester had ended. I was still in college and I gotten a couple C's. But instead of being like, well, please try to study harder next time. I know you're better than that. You can do this. You're a good student. You know, you can be nice about it. I told him I was sorry and he looks at me and he goes, well, you should be. You don't do your laundry. You don't have a job. You don't do this or that. And the least you could do is get good grades. Like being so fucking condescending. And I literally just got up and walked away because I thought if I sit here, I'm just going to cuss this guy out. I don't care if he's my stepdad. Yeah, he was not the greatest guy to always live with. I think partly what got me through the years that we did live with him was the house that we lived in with him. I pretty much had the whole upstairs to myself. He and my mom had the downstairs bedroom, so I was kind of in my own little world in the upstairs realm, so I didn't really have to deal with him that much. But the day that they actually decided they were going to split, that caught me off guard, and I remember that day because he picks me up from college to drop me off at my dad's. Usually most of the car rides I have with him are pretty quiet. I just don't really feel the need to really say much to him. But on this particular day, I kind of decided to put my guard down a little bit. So like we talked about music and just talked about other things. And you know, funny enough, it's one of the few decent, nice car rides I actually had with him. Another reason that car ride sticks out with me is because I remember at one point I had forgotten something at home. Now, most of the time when I'm driving around with him and I forget something, he's like, oh well. We were about halfway to my dad's and he was actually nice enough to turn the car around, to drive me all the way back for me to grab whatever it was, and then drop me off at my dad's. That is the only time he ever did that for me. So you can sort of imagine the surprise that fell upon me a couple hours later when my mother calls me like in tears saying that he and her are going to be separating. And you know, it's sort of a mixed emotion because on one hand there's this part of me that was kind of hoping this day would come, but at the same time it's like my mother's crying. This is the man she married. The whole reason I was putting up with him for the better part of a decade at this point was because my mother loved him. I decided at 11 years old I'm gonna put up with this man because if he's making my mother happy, who am I to come between that? That may have been the first like adult decision I ever made in my life. The fact that I'm not going to come between two people who love each other. If she loves him, then it's not really my place to say anything. Now, years later after they had separated, I had become more open about this with my mom. She's like, well, why didn't you tell me, Christopher? And I'm like, well, because if you loved him, I wasn't going to say anything. That's still my stance on those kinds of subjects, even now in my 30s. If that was the case with the guy that my mom's married to right now, if you love him, I'm not going to say anything. It's not about what I think about him. Fortunately, the guy she's married to right now, I don't like feel that way. I love my current stepdad. But no, 20 was a bit of a mentally challenging time because again, work, school, separation. Then we skipped to 2014 where I turned 21. That was a very mentally challenging time for me. Particularly in the fall because that was around the time that one of my dogs had passed away. I was now entering my final year of college. I was still working and that semester was very stressful. I remember I was doing this journalism class and that was the kind of course where I would go to bed at night just all paranoid about how I was going to do in this class. And then my dad got into some serious trouble, which I don't want to go in full detail about, but like he got into some serious trouble that he's still kind of suffering the repercussions of, and it's situations that, if I'm going to be frank, has fractured a great deal of my trust in him in the past decade. But it was the kind of trouble where he at one point moved to Colorado out where my uncle was living because they were going to help him get work because he was unemployed at the time, and that didn't last long. He came back literally a month later, which was in January of 2015, because he just didn't know the area. He wasn't getting along with my uncle's girlfriend at the time, and he just felt better that if he was over here, he would have a better chance of getting work because at least he knew the area. But as far as like me and my mental health, I mean, like I said, that one semester was very stressful. Also work, it was the fall. I mean, now we're approaching the holidays and that's always a stressful time. At the same time, I had fallen out with one of my high school friends who was a friend who at the time I had some lingering feelings for. And with all the stress that was going on with me at the time, I do admit that I'd become a very clingy, obsessive friend at the time and it permanently ended our friendship. I take full responsibility for that. Those last couple months of 2014, into the beginnings of 2015, not a good time for me. Very mentally challenging, very depressing, very just not knowing what to do with myself. Have I ever physically harmed myself during the process of these mental episodes? No. I've just been sort of playing through the pain as best as I could, but it was not a fun time. And then 22 and 23, I mean, better than 21, but they weren't the best times of my life either. Then around 24, the saddest part of 24 was when my dog Jack had to be put to sleep. Keep in mind, he was hit by a car when he was less than a year old, so he had back problems for pretty much the bulk of his life. And yeah, that last year with him just wasn't the best. He was really struggling. I didn't actually go with my mom and my stepdad to put him to sleep. I just didn't want to deal with that emotion at the time, which I kind of regret now. There's still that part of me that thinks it was my dog. I should have been there. And now I feel like, okay, I have my dog Lulu. What's going to happen the time that she has to go? If I went for her, what does that say about the time I didn't go for Jack? You know, these are the kinds of thoughts that go through my head from time to time. But 24 was sort of the start of the period that would eventually lead to the life-changing mental health moment that has permanently been etched in my mind to the point that I cannot stop thinking about it every day. And it's the moment that has given me the perspective and the self-reevaluation that I've had to take upon myself to become a better person. So when I was 23, I actually at one point deactivated my Facebook just because, I don't know, I just became a little disinterested in it and I just kind of wanted some time away for it. And that was a break that lasted 2 years. But during that 2-year break, at one point I joined Twitter for the first time. Now, Twitter was a site that for the longest time I had been kind of resisting, but I joined Twitter back around mid-2017. And pretty much the bulk of my years on Twitter, I was engaged in an online community based around a YouTube channel that I was watching at the time. This wasn't like planned or anything, it's just this is what I was into at the time that I was joining Twitter, so naturally, okay, yeah, I'm gonna follow those channels and follow some people from that. Obviously, this could change over time. I'll find other communities to be a part of or whatever. But no, the bulk of those 4 years was basically me interacting with that one specific community. Not that there was anything wrong with that. I actually got to interact with some really nice, cool, very creative people who were doing like fan art and cosplays and stuff. These were kind of the communities that I didn't really engage in much, but developed a much bigger and deeper respect for. And it was nice. And there was this one person who was also a YouTuber who I was engaging with a lot on Twitter. And after about a year, this person actually followed me back and we became really nice, good online friends for a while. Around that same time, I actually took a trip to Connecticut to a convention where some of these people were going to be at because I wanted to meet some of these people in person because I only know these people through Twitter. Because this isn't like people I know from high school or work who I see on like a semi-regular basis. But the fact that some of these people from my Twitter crowd were going to be at this convention, I thought, let me go there because Connecticut was the closest convention I could get to that I knew that some of them would be at. And I planned out that trip for a good few months. I tried to get some friends to go with me and they were all working and everything. Eventually I narrowed it down to my dad. We could come up Thursday and leave Friday afternoon, which I got him to agree to extend to Saturday morning because he had work on Saturday, but it was in the afternoon. I just figured, you know what? If I'm going to be here for one good day, let me make the most of that one day. And funny enough, that's really to date the only major road trip I've ever done with my dad. All the traveling I've done over the years have been like on my mom's side of the family. Like I've been to Texas, Colorado, Pennsylvania, been to California once, went to Massachusetts a few times, but never with my dad. The most out of state I've ever been with him was going to Philly for some concerts. So this was sort of a first time trip for both of us because he had never been that far north before. But even when we went to the convention, you know, like that was new for my dad. He had never been to any of these kinds of cons before. Like he had dragged me out to some sports conventions a couple times throughout the years. But as far as like seeing cosplays and stuff, that was new for him and like that really opened his eyes. And then I got to meet some of my Twitter friends and it was so nice. I got some hugs from some of them. I gave a lot of them fan art. But the one person I was definitely the most excited to see at the time was the person who, again, was a YouTuber at the time. And she gave me like 5-6 hugs when I met her. I didn't even ask for those hugs. She just came over and just gave me some hugs. It was so nice. It was one of the best trips of my life. I mean, despite the events that would take place later on, I have no regrets about that trip because I personally financed that trip myself. I had a great time. I said I would totally do this again. I mean, obviously not now, given the state of circumstances that happened later on. I have like almost no regrets about the first 2 years that I was in those communities. The first 2 years were fun. I was interacting with some really cool, creative people. It was so fun, so lovely. I was getting some really nice recognition from some of these people in the communities. It really caught me off guard at the time, but I don't take any of it for granted looking back at it now. I mean, listen, I can't speak for everybody else. Maybe they've had to retroactively change their opinions of my role in those communities based on what happened later on, at which point, if any of them are watching this, I'm sorry from the bottom of my heart. No, I'm not saying I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm saying I'm sorry that I put you in the position to have to feel that way. But for me personally, I have practically no regrets about the first 2 years. I got to be very creative in that time because I was making all this fan art. I've never really done that before, at least not to really share with a bunch of people online. I started doing some more YouTube stuff, not a lot, not to the extent that I'm doing now, but I was doing a little bit more with my YouTube channel. I got my creative flows going at the time. And the fact that this one person who was like my favorite YouTuber at the time gave me a birthday shout out on my birthday back in 2019, bought me stuff on my Amazon wish list to congratulate me on a job promotion I had at the time. A list of things that they did not have to do for me, that they were kind enough to do for me. And I look back at it even now and I think to myself, what was I really doing? Was that a fantasy or was that all real? I mean, it just felt so surreal at the time. I appreciate it. I'm not taking anything away from it, even if the parties involved want to take it all away at this point. The only real regrets I have about the first 2 years were situations that personally were beyond my control. Around that time, there was a lot of bullshit drama going on within the communities. I even got caught in the crossfire of some of this bullshit at the time, but nothing that I started, nothing that I was involved with. That's really the only thing I look back with some regret in the first 2 years. But everything else, as far as like what I was doing within that community at the time, I had a blast. I would love to relive those first 2 years. Those are memories that I'm always going to cherish. But just to get into the somewhat darker areas of this period of my life. So in November of 2018, I got hired as a cart pusher over at Sam's Club. I was already a cart pusher at the job that I was at up to that point, but at this point I thought, well, it's more money, it's better hours, I'll have a schedule 2-3 weeks in advance, which I didn't have at my other job, and I was there for 6 months. And the first 3 months were actually not that bad. I thought to myself, I could definitely tough it out here for a little while. But within the last 2-3 months, things just gradually started changing a great deal, and it just got to the point where I was literally waking up every day thinking to myself, oh my God, what's going to happen today? I'm of the mindset that regardless of what your job is, regardless of what the pay is, if you're waking up every day and you're afraid of what's going to happen at work that day, that's how much the job is stressing you out. It's time to jump ship. And that's what was happening to me those last like 2-3 months that I worked at Sam's Club. Because the management was just keeping this closer eye on us, that it just felt like they were just sort of plotting something, like a way to get rid of some of us somehow. And for me, the turning point happened at the beginning of May. It was a Sunday, it was a rainy day. The dude I was working with that day, it was actually his last day, and I think the only reason he showed up is because he knew he was working with me. But it was a really busy day. We were pulling a line of carts up, and one of our managers was pulling a line of carts from the side of the building. And as we're bringing this line up, she looks at us and she says, "We've been calling you on the walkie. People are complaining that there's no carts in here. I don't understand how there's 2 of you and you let it get this low." Now that last part has stuck with me for the past 6 years. You let it get this low. The moment she said that, that was sort of the planting of the seed that I thought it's not worth to stay here. So on my way home that day, I actually went to my old job just to see if my manager was there and possibly talk to them about getting my job back. I went there, I didn't see them, and at the same time I'm thinking to myself, am I doing this more as a reflex or a rebound just because I had a really bad day? I thought, just go home, get out of your wet soaked clothes, have some dinner, just relax, hopefully tomorrow will be better. Just to be safe, I did go on my computer that night and applied back to my old job. But then something happened the next morning that fully convinced me, no, I have to go back to my old job. So the guy I was working with the next morning, I was telling him the whole story of what happened the day before, and I didn't even finish the story. He cut me off at one point and said, "Oh yeah, I was talking to her this morning. She said you guys were standing against the wall the whole day and nothing got done." I thought, she said what? We didn't stand against the wall that entire day. We never had time to. So I thought, she's purposely making up lies about me now. And that was the point where I just thought, nope, this is not worth it anymore. So after my shift that day, I actually went back to my old job. I actually asked for my manager this time. She took me upstairs. I told her this situation. Long story short, I got my job back within like 3 minutes, which some people thought was crazy of me at the time. They thought, well, here you're going to get paid less. You're not going to have a schedule 2 weeks in advance. What these people don't understand was this was a major decision I had to make in regards to my mental health. Yes, we all have to work, but when your job is pulling you to the point where you're either afraid you're going to have the worst mental breakdown of your life and just walk, or they're just going to come up with some bullshit reason to get rid of you, it's time to leave. I was fully convinced that regardless of what I did, even if I tried to stay, I was not going to be there much longer. But to be fair, when I went back to my old job, I actually asked them, I'll stick with carts for a little bit, but can I maybe get moved to something else at some point? Which eventually led to them training me on register, which I did for a little bit, but then a customer complained about something that was sort of a pure accident on my part, but nonetheless, they got pushed me back on carts. But at some point, I was moved back inside to the department that I'm basically have been in now for the last 6 years. But no, that 2019 to 2021 period was definitely a mentally challenging time for me as far as work was concerned. It was also a mentally challenging time for me as far as like what was going on in the world. Like in 2020, we had the elections. I mentioned earlier that, you know, I got a little bit involved in the discussions on that just because I felt I had to at the time, but I quickly learned, no, I didn't have to. The pandemic was going on and the effects of that were definitely contributing to my mental health. I mean, truth be told, I am the kind of guy who likes to stay home and do nothing, but I think that sense of isolation and the lockdown was definitely contributing very heavily to my mental health and my stress levels, especially with work because, you know, everybody was in this panic. They're rushing to the store. They're trying to stock up so they can get through this whole lockdown and everything. And I think just being in the midst of that was definitely not good for my stress and not good for my mental health during that period. But to kind of get back to my Twitter community for a second, things around this time were definitely changing drastically, and it was all coming down to my mental health. More specifically, it was getting really bad between me and my YouTuber friend on Twitter, because it was getting to the point now where I was really starting to open doors for myself. As I mentioned before, I was really kind of caught off off guard with how people were being responsive to me on social media at that time, that after a while, I just started to take a lot of it for granted. Even to the point that I was actually starting to become quite competitive with some of the people in the communities. Not that they necessarily knew that, but I definitely was becoming competitive. And it was just getting to the point where I just felt every good thing that I was contributing, I was deserving of something in return, which is a very horrible and narcissistic way to approach things. Listen, it's awesome when we contribute something and we're rewarded for it or acknowledged for it, but that doesn't happen every time. And in some cases, you just have to sort of say, you contributed and that should be enough. And that really should have been my mindset at the time, and unfortunately it wasn't. And that was even more so the case with my YouTuber friend. I remember one time I messaged them on Instagram saying something like, it pisses me off that you follow me everywhere else, but you don't follow me here. Again, a really shitty thing like that honestly would not even bother me now. Listen, there's people I talk to online these days who don't follow me or friend me anywhere, but they still respond to me, and that's enough for me now. But just like little things like that, and it just got to the point where just nothing was making me happy. Just the tiniest little thing was just offsetting me at the time. And it was also just driving a further wedge between me and my YouTuber friend, to the point that they had to set boundaries. It's not that they didn't want me around anymore, it's not that they didn't want me to contribute anymore, but they didn't want me, you know, private messaging them anymore, which, given my mental health at the time, I was constantly trying to bend the rules a little bit, because I've now come far enough in my healing at this point to admit that yes, I did have some lingering feelings for this person, which I think is partly what was contributing heavily to my situation with them, because I knew these were feelings that were never going to pay off later on. But nonetheless, I was trying to bend the rules a little bit with these boundaries, which was wrong. I would not do that now. The only boundaries you might see me break these days is I might reach out to somebody to just say, I'm sorry, not for how you feel, no, for what I did. And at that point, I just walk and I just leave it at that. And then 2021 was not a good time. I was between jobs at the time. I quit my job twice that year, believe it or not. First time was when I got a delivery driver position at Domino's, which I did for one day, and I just decided, nah, I don't want to do this. So I actually withdrew that resignation. Second time was when I got hired at Home Depot for about a month. Not that it was necessarily a bad job, but you get the vibes, and I just thought to myself, at its best, it's a boring job. At its worst, it sucks, and I just feel like there's really nobody in my corner here to help make this better for me. So I did it for a month, and I went back to my old job. In April of that year, one of my dogs died, and I did a Twitter post about it, which got like no response, and I don't think it's just because nobody responded to it. I think it just sort of fell through the cracks, but I nonetheless took it personally at the time, and I just did this whole post saying like, this is why I don't like posting on Twitter. It pisses me off that I post these things, nobody reacts and everything. And again, not the kind of post I would make these days, and I'm really kind of ashamed of myself for doing that. Nonetheless, in the heat of all that, I unfollowed my one YouTuber friend, and in retaliation, they unfollowed me back. And deservingly so. I deserved that at the time. But to make matters worse, I practically was like messaging them over the next few days, begging them to follow me back again. And dude, you don't do that. You unfollowed them first. Don't put them in the position to have to follow you back. Again, definitely not something I would do now. But I continued in that community for another few months. It was a struggle. I mean, I definitely felt like I had been downgraded, but at the same time, that's all on me. You're not keeping your mental health in check, dude, and this is why this is causing a bigger divide in terms of where you were in this community. I mean, just 2 years before that, my YouTuber friend had personally recommended me to be a moderator on a Twitch channel, which I accepted at the time just because I just thought, well, they're actually offering something to me. I don't know what this is or whatever, but I'll take it. In retrospect, I shouldn't have taken it just because it's just not something I'm cut out for. There are definitely way better qualified people for that. I mean, I'm always going to be grateful they at least threw my name out there, but when you're talking about this period in 2021, they wouldn't have recommended me for that now. Finally, around October of 2021, I messaged the person on a Discord, and again, they had to reiterate the boundaries, and that led to a big fight between her and I, where I was saying, well, I've only been breaking these boundaries like within reason and everything, which I mean, I look back now and that's not true. And they rightfully retaliated by saying, listen, I've gone through all these messages and they all tell a different story. So that really was the end of it. And again, that's not what I would do now. But unfortunately, because of the state of my mental health at that time, and because of the circumstances related to those situations, it led to what is arguably the worst mental breakdown of my life. And not only was it a bad mental breakdown, it's the moment that has now forced perspective on myself in terms of where I was with my mental health, where I was in terms of how I was treating people, where I was on my stance on boundaries. Like, I have a much better respect for boundaries these days. So I'm now going to skip over to April of 2022. April 3rd, 2022 to be exact. The reason I remember that is because it's 2 days before my birthday. I uploaded a YouTube video that I shot in March. It was an unlisted video, but I still ended up linking it on my Twitter, so nonetheless, I'm still posting it in a public place. It was a video called Breaking My Silence, and it was a 1-hour video basically summing up my whole time in that community from like the middle of 2017 up to that point, going on full detail about what I was doing in that community, and more specifically, my interactions with my ex-YouTuber friend. That basically was the first half of the video, but the last like 20 minutes of the video, I just skewed off on a terrible mental mental tangent. I just let out all this rage towards my ex-friend, screaming and yelling about how I didn't think this was fair. I said they accused me of crossing lines when they've lied to me for 2 years. Because of you, I can't go on Twitter anymore. Stupid bullshit like that. Not the stance I would take these days, and it's the day that is never gonna leave me. That is an image that's always gonna be burned into my mind, whether I like it or not, but the only good thing about it is it gave me the needed perspective that I needed to earn at the time to put me on a better path. But nonetheless, my Twitter crowd saw that video. How did they respond? They all mass blocked me. I have a list of regrets in my life, but if I had to pick the one regret in my entire life, doing that video is definitely high, if not at the top of that list. And I remember I was scared for the first few days because I just thought, oh my god, what's gonna happen now? What's gonna happen now? But for the most part, nothing's happened since then. Some might even say I got off easy. That doesn't make me feel better about it, but nonetheless, and I just thought, what do I do now? I don't want that to be the final message I leave with these people. I thought I have to apologize. I have to address this. But I thought I can't do it right away. I can't film an apology the week after and share it with them because now they're gonna think, oh, he's just doing this in retaliation. He's not actually sorry. At the same time, I didn't want to wait too long either because then it just seems like I'm kicking a dead horse at that point. But that could be the case either way, but nonetheless, they all deserve an apology. More specifically, my ex-YouTuber friend. And it took me 6 months to finally muscle the courage and strength to sit in front of the same camera that I'm sitting in front of right now to make that apology video. That was in October of 2022 when I filmed it. I made it a very in-depth apology video too. My favorite part of that video is I had a whole section in there where I name-checked like all my Twitter friends, why I appreciated them, why I found them all to be unique and cool individuals. I wanted to show that I was not doing this on the spare of the moment. I spent the last 6 months really thinking about what I wanted to say, and that I not only wanted to give these people the apology of my life, but I wanted to do it right. And I spent the next 4 months trying to cut it down, and it ended up being a long video. It was like an hour and 20-minute video, which I mean, it didn't need to be that long when I look back at it now. Because at the same time, I was also using the video as an excuse to let it all out in terms of my work stress and everything, bring everybody up to date in terms of what I've been doing since I've been out of the community, which I really didn't need to do. I should have just focused on my mental health and just the situation at hand and had that be the bulk of the video, and I probably could have cut out at least a good 20, 30, maybe even 40 minutes. I do think that the finished video represents where I was emotionally, mentally with those situations up to that point. I won't second guess myself from that angle, but I finished it around February. Now, how I was going to present this to everybody was going to be challenging because, again, they all mass blocked me and I wasn't about to create new social media accounts just to deliver this video. So I decided to be a little selective in terms of who I was going to send it to because I still had a few handful of people that I could send it to on some sites. But even after I finished it, I uploaded it. It was an unlisted video and it took me like a day or so just to muscle enough courage to send it to one person. It took me maybe 2 or 3 more days to muscle enough courage to send it to the second person. It took me probably another week to muscle the courage to send it to the third person. Now, the fourth and last person I sent it to was my ex-YouTuber friend. Why were they the last person I sent it to? Well, even when I was filming the video, I didn't have the intention of sending it to them. Not because I wasn't sorry, but because I just thought to myself, I've done enough emotional damage to that person. Bad enough I did that video. I mean, that video was the icing on the cake, but everything that I did up to that point, that just ruined our friendship and ruined their trust in me. Case in point, the last year that I was in that community, my ex-YouTuber friend had actually started going to therapy sessions. The last time that her and I talked, she actually brought it to my attention that she had actually discussed some of the things I did with her therapist. That's a pill that even to this day I'm still trying to swallow. I never in a billion years thought I would be the focus of anyone's therapy sessions. I don't know if I will ever fully get over that. So when I filmed my apology video, I just thought I'll send it to a few other people. If it somehow gets to her through them, whatever. But as the months went on, I began to realize, yes, I did have valid reasons for not wanting to send it to my ex-YouTuber friend, even though the bulk of the apology video was about them. But at the same time, I was also kind of missing the point in terms of why I did the video in the first place. It wasn't to fix anything. I had long accepted at that point there was nothing I was going to say or do at that point that was going to fix anything. So why did you make the apology video? To apologize for what I did, to acknowledge what I did, and I had the worst mental breakdown of my life and you became a victim of it. The best I can do at this point is say I'm sorry. It goes back to what I said a little while ago. Saying you're sorry is not about the pursuit of forgiveness. It's acknowledging things we did wrong. And as time went on, I kept thinking to myself, even if they don't care if I apologize, even if they don't want an apology from me, they at least deserve an apology. I at least owe that to her. So finally, around August of 2023, I finally muscled the courage to send that apology video to them. I didn't get a response and I wasn't expecting to. And since then, I have not reached out to that person. Not because I don't have the physical means to do so. No, if I was really that desperate and that mentally unhinged as I was a few years ago, I would keep messaging them, but I haven't. I'm making a promise to myself that I'm never going to message that person anymore. My friends' well-being and their own mental health is more important to me at this point than renewing the friendship. And if there's anybody anybody out there who just think I'm just longing for this hope that we're all going to be friends again one day, I couldn't ask you guys to be my friends again, even if you were willing to be my friends again. More specifically, my ex-YouTuber friend. I couldn't ask her to be my friend again, even if by some unlikely chance she was willing to be my friend again. And it's both for reasons that are within my control and not within my control. But I think the biggest reason is because I know there are other people in that community who still will never forget that video I posted back in 2022, just having the worst mental breakdown of my life. And that's the image that, regardless of what I say, regardless of what healing I do, that's the image of me that they're going to stick with. I don't need them to look at her and be like, how the fuck can you be friends with him again after what he did? Unfortunately, there are just people in this world who just don't want to see you change. You do something horrible and that's the image you have to walk off with. And I'm not saying there isn't people in the world who deserve that kind of response. Listen, there are shitty people in the world, but at the same time, there are people who have done shitty things and they've taken upon themselves to try to become a better person. Why do I want to become a better person? Because the person I was a few years ago, he wasn't going to survive. If you really break this down, this is a survival story. The person I was a few years ago, he was either going to get himself into even more trouble or he was just going to self-destruct, and Lord knows what was going to happen at that point. I want to survive. I want to know what the next phase of my life is. The world's not a perfect place, but I'm still here. Every day I wake up is just a reminder that my story's not over yet. But nonetheless, I still have days where that particular day a few years ago has not left me. I have days where either I don't think about it as much or I still think about it a lot. But nonetheless, I have yet to have a day in the past 3.5 years where I have not thought about what I did to some degree. And before anybody wants to say that's an obsession, I think the fact that I haven't really fully let it go is partly what has helped keep me grounded in terms of my mental health in the last few years. Alcoholics have their moment of clarity. I'm not an alcoholic, but when I did that video a few years ago, that's as close to a moment of clarity as I'm ever going to get. But no, I still have days where I think that day is going to come back to haunt me in the worst possible way. Maybe that's today. Maybe the day that this video goes up, that's the day that that is going to come back to bite me in the ass in the worst possible way. But there's a good side to that as well, because if I have people who watch this video and learn what I did and they turn their backs on me, at least at this point I can sort of say it's on my own terms. This is my story. I feel it's my entitlement to tell the story. I'm not going to bullshit my story. I created this situation for myself, so I'm going to tell it as it is. It was a horrible, life-changing moment in my life, but I'm just grateful that at least it's given me the perspective and clarity that I needed to achieve to bring myself to a mentally better place than I was at the time. I don't want someone who doesn't like me to take my story and just run off with it and try to turn people away from me just because they don't like me. I'm fine if you don't like me. I never asked anybody to like me. Not liking me doesn't entitle you to tell my story. Same with people who want to look at me and say, dude, just grow up, just let it go. Listen, I don't tell you how to deal with your mental situations, don't tell me how to deal with mine. And I still think about my ex-YouTuber friend on a regular basis, not because of those lingering feelings I had a few years ago, but because of what I did to them. I mean, if they were already talking about the things that I had done up to that point with their therapist, I can only imagine what they were talking about after I posted that video. And those are thoughts that just stick with me on a regular basis, and it's hard. I don't like talking about this. I really haven't had too many coping mechanisms in terms of dealing with this situation. I don't really talk about it with my family. I don't really talk about any of my serious situations with my family, not because they don't care or they don't love me and they just don't want to listen to what I have to talk about. No, I have a very supportive family. I'm grateful for my family, but at the same time, in terms of that situation, they're just going to be like, oh, well, you were sticking up for yourself. Don't feel sorry for that. There's a difference between standing up for yourself and just straight up harassing somebody. And whether I like to admit it or not, what I did in that video was straight up harassment. So part of the reason why I don't really talk about this with my family is, again, I appreciate that they only want to look at the good in me. And I mean, listen, I know I'm a good person. And I know I have people in my life who will definitely verify that at the heart of it all, he has his moments, but he is at heart a good person. For my Twitter friends, they only had a few short years to really get to know me. And sadly, that just happened to coincide with a very mentally challenging period of my life. If I really want to cope with the situation in an honest way, I can't just have people saying, oh, well, you're a good person. You didn't do anything wrong. You don't post an hour-long video harassing a woman, calling her a liar, making her the victim of the situations you created for yourself. People will turn their back on you like that. And I saw it happen to me. I got what I had coming to me. I mean, one thing I've had to do several times in the last few years is the shoe on the other foot scenario. What would I have done if I was in their shoes? I would have cut me off too. I wouldn't want to have been friends with somebody like me. I don't want to be friends with people who want to harass people for the situations they created for themselves. No, that doesn't mean I don't wish the best for you. You could be the world's biggest scumbag for all I care, but I'll still wish the best for you. At the same time, through my journey of healing, there's other things I've had to tell myself as well. Yes, I was in the wrong for what I did, but at the same time, I know that some of my Twitter friends posted stuff about me at the time in regards to what I did. How do I know that, even though they cut me off? Because I was able to find the posts at the time by not being logged into my account. Granted, this was right after they cut me off. If I wanted to find those posts now, I would have to make a new account, but I'm not going to do that. I'm at the point now with my healing that I'm not digging up dirt on myself. You want to come up to my face and say bullshit to me? Fine. But if it's just stuff that you're just going to gossip and talk about amongst yourselves, then guess what? I don't want to be around you. With all due respect. Again, I'm not defending what I did. This is not about me trying to paint myself as a good guy. side. No, I was the bad guy. And in their defense, there's things that I could criticize them for that I've done myself. So again, this is lessons that applies to everybody. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and say like, hey, you guys talking about me behind my back amongst yourselves. That's not exactly making you better people, regardless if you think I was in the wrong or not. I still miss those people nonetheless. I miss my time in that community. I know I'll never be welcome back there. I know I will never see these people again, because even if I see them again, I don't want to be the guy where it's like, oh God, it's him. No, I'm not going to be him. I'm not going to be your gossip subject. But in their defense, you think I haven't been in situations where I've had to cut people off? Just a few months ago, I mass blocked somebody I knew from my high school days. It was somebody who I've had an on-off friendship with over the years, and her and I have never had good communication. And I'm the kind of guy where, you know, the most I ask of people is just be direct and have good communication. I'm not saying you have to drop everything you do to talk to me or whatever. Especially these days, like, listen, if I message you and it takes you 2-3 days to get back to me, I'm fine with that. As opposed to a few years ago where like, I want you to get back to me now. But with this one ex-friend I had from high school, we have never had good communication. And technically they've taken advantage of me. 10 years ago, they were going to college and they needed these school books, which I had, but they didn't have the money for the books at the time. But they promised me that if I let them borrow the books, that they would give them back to me at the end of the term. That was almost 10 years ago, and I never got my books back. And keep in mind, these were expensive school books at the time. And I was bitter about that for a while, to the point that I stopped talking to them for a few years. But skip like 2 years ago, I mean, keep in mind, I mean, I'm knee deep in my mental healing and everything. I thought, you know, let me reconnect with that person because I would like to know what they're up to these days. So we were just kind of talking on social media for a little bit. I wanted to have like some type of get together with them, maybe have lunch with them or something, just to see how they've been doing. And like once or twice we agreed, but then they had to cancel the last moment, and they just kept telling me they're going to get back to me, they're going to get back to me, they're going to get back to me. And finally, a few months ago, they messaged me saying like, yeah, let's meet up this week, but I need to borrow like $20 or something. And I was like, okay. But then the next message they said, oh, never mind, which basically tells me that they probably got the money from somebody else and now they don't need me. And it was really at that point I just thought, you know what, no, I'm not going to be taken advantage of by this person again. This just feels like a complete rehash of 10 years ago. And this is the kind of situation that I do not need to deal with in terms of my mental health. I mean, I wish that person the best, but again, just the poor communication, the fact that, you know, they took advantage of me once and I just feel like they were going to do it again, it was just time to cut them off. I mean, I know that person has had struggles in the last few years. She has 2 kids with a guy who, according to her, was an abusive guy. I can't confirm or deny that or not because I don't know the guy. I've never met him. I've never spoken to him. I will say that if the stories are true, I hope this guy gets what he has coming to them, but at the same time, it's not my story to tell, so I won't tell it. I mentioned before that when I was younger, at one point my mom had reconnected with this guy that she had gone to school with. He was living in Boston, and my mom was adamant that she was going to marry this guy, and her and I were going to move out to Boston, which I did not want at the time. And my dad was definitely not going to let this happen, and this was a very struggling time for me during my childhood. But the moment where I felt somebody kind of cross the line with me was I had this babysitter when I was younger who, funny enough, the reason she became my babysitter was because her daughter used to work with my dad. And my dad was talking to her saying, we were trying to get a babysitter for Christopher. And she said like, oh, my mom babysits and everything. And that's basically how they entered the picture. But as the years went on, you know, and they became more aware of the struggles between my mom and my dad, they kind of gravitated more towards my mom, to the point that one day I was at my babysitter's daughter's house, and my babysitter actually came and picked me up there and was going to bring me back to her house while we waited for my dad to come pick me up. But that car ride that I had with my babysitter from her daughter's house to her house, it was like the longest car ride of my life. My babysitter was totally for me and my mom going to Boston. She started listing off reasons why she thought it was a good thing, and you know, you can come back home during this time or whatever. I just remember saying like, I don't want to talk about this right now. And she was like, well, you should talk about it. And she just kept going on and on and on about it. And I just did not want to have this conversation at the time. Listen, it's bad enough that here I am, 9 years old. I'm gonna have to go home with my dad, and he's gonna be on the phone with my mother screaming at her about this. Or I'll go home with my mom, and she'll be on the phone screaming at my dad about this. I'm already dealing enough with this as is at home. Technically, you're not part of my family. Technically, you're not gonna be the deciding vote on where I'm gonna go. I'm a little kid. I'm 9 years old. If I don't want to talk about this, I shouldn't have to talk about this. Am I over that situation now? Of course. Maybe that's not nearly on the level of doing a YouTube video that harasses somebody for your own troubles, but I at least can generate sympathy for those kinds of situations. Now, have I had any other subsequent moments that are on that level? For the most part, no, although there is 2 particular moments in the last 3 years that have stuck with me. First one happened about 2 months later. It was actually the day before my grandmother's birthday, to be exact. 2022 was a very struggling year for me as far as work was concerned, and I came home one night and I was just really tired and burned out, and I was really getting to a point like, you know, I really think I'm just gonna start looking for another job. But I got into this heated argument with my mom, and she's like, well, if you quit, they're not gonna take you back. I mean, just this whole heated back and forth. Now, truth be told, I told a very vague version of this story when I did my apology video for my Twitter people, but I didn't tell them the actual climax of this story. So if anybody from my Twitter days is watching this, I do apologize that I wasn't fully upfront about this story. So her and I just kept going back and forth, and then finally she just said, suck it up. If you want to come home and kick a hole in the wall, go ahead. I know she didn't mean literally kick a hole in the wall, but I actually turned to her and I said, I can kick a hole in the wall? I literally got up from my seat, walked across the room, and kicked a hole in the wall. Yeah, that was the kick her around the world, because I am not a destructive person like that. That is the first and hopefully to date last time I will ever kick a hole in the wall. I do not go punching holes in walls, kicking, nope, I don't do that shit. She told me to go to my dad's, and I went to my dad's, and then when I got there, you know, we FaceTime, and she's in tears. She's like, Christopher, what did I do? How did I break you? How can we fix you? And I just reassured her. I'm like, Mom, you didn't do anything. You know, I'm just tired and I'm burned out from work. Next day, she picked me up and went up to my grandmother's for her birthday. We didn't tell my grandmother this whole story, but I mean, at that point, like, things were at peace. It was okay again. So that's one moment. The second moment happened earlier last year. It was March, and my grandmother on my dad's side was on her deathbed, basically. She had been battling breast cancer for a number of years up to that point, but she was in hospice, and unfortunately, she had these sores on her body, and because of that, there was these complications that was preventing the doctors from being able to treat her cancer at the time, and that was ultimately what took her from us. Where does this play in with my mental health? Because there was a member of my family who was the one who was basically taking care of her, and we just felt that he should have brought it to our attention a lot sooner that she had these sores on her body, because if they had gotten treated a lot sooner, maybe she'd still be with us right now. My grandmother wasn't the healthiest person in the world. She was a heavy smoker for the longest time, but when she got cancer, she quit cold turkey, but nonetheless, she wasn't always the healthiest person, so I'm not saying she was going to be here for another 10 years, but at the same time, I think to myself, if this one member of my family had spoken up sooner, maybe situations would be different now. Now, as far as my mental health goes, what I ended up doing in response to that, I can somewhat forgive myself for it now, just because, again, I was in this sort of pre-grieving stage, because like a few days after that was when she passed away. But what I ultimately did was I went home, I went on my TikTok, and I did this like 10-minute TikTok, tearing a new asshole into this member of my family, because I just felt he should have spoken up soon and everything, and this might not be the way it is right now, and I was just so angry. So that is one time I sort of slipped back into the role that I did in that YouTube video a few years ago, although in this case, I'm not ripping on somebody for something that's my fault, I'm ripping on something that's technically their fault. But nonetheless, don't be making videos ripping on people or whatever. It's one thing if you want to rip on yourself, don't rip on people, especially members of your family. So sometime after that, I did end up deleting that TikTok. But those are really the only two incidents that stick with me in the last few years in terms of me being off the mental scale again. Do I still have like my stress spasms when I have to deal with an annoying customer on the phone, or when I'm recording a TikTok and it starts lagging? Trust me, you do not want to be around me when TikTok starts lagging and I'm just trying to do a simple video. Yes, but like as far as like me being off the mental scale like I was when I did that YouTube video 3.5 years ago, no. Me kicking the hole in the wall, me doing this TikTok about a member of my family, yeah, those are the only two that really stick with me. So outside of those two situations, in the last few years, I've just been focusing heavily on being in a much better headspace and just focusing on my healing. Because the big lesson that all of us have to learn with mental health is real. If you want to heal and change from some of the situations you've been through as a result of mental health, you have to commit. Mental health is a commitment. And the day I had to realize it was a commitment was 3.5 years ago. I also had to get deep lessons in entitlement. I was trying to entitle myself to things that I was never entitled to in the first place. A lot of what I was earning in terms of the respect and kindness with the friends I was making online, it was just a really nice, good privilege, but I was abusing that privilege. So I've had to learn that, dude, don't act entitled, because that will turn people away as well. But just the same, even with my healing, I've learned that there is two things that I am entitled to, regardless of what I did. First is healing. Don't ever let anybody tell you you're not entitled to healing. Second, in peace of mind. We're all entitled to peace of mind. We're all entitled to heal ourselves, to cleanse ourselves, to become better people because of our mistakes. Don't ever let anybody tell you that you're not allowed to heal yourself because of your mistakes. Just to kind of illustrate the kind of points I want to make about mental health, here's something that I saw on Instagram earlier this year. Now, for those of you who follow this channel, I've done several videos about Goosebumps. Now, one of the guys I follow in the Goosebumps community is Goosebumps Ozzy fan. This is actually something he posted in his Instagram story earlier this year, because this was around the time that he was becoming open about the fact that he was dealing with narcissistic behavior on his part, and that he was going to be seeking therapy, and he just wanted to get himself in a better headspace. So Goosebumps Ozzy fan, I praise you for being open about that and also sharing this in your story. I don't think he had this posted for long, but I'm glad he did, because as soon as I read this, I thought, wow, I can relate to this very much. Yes, it's possible to change narcissistic traits or behaviors, but it requires a commitment to self-awareness and genuine openness to change. Therapy. Therapy can help you identify and understand the triggers that lead to defensive or controlling behaviors. A therapist can also help you uncover underlying issues that may be fueling certain reactions. Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, I don't consider myself a trained psychiatrist or therapist or psychologist or whatever you want to call it, but I've just been lucky enough that I've just been looking within myself at the situations that I've been through enough to get the lessons that I feel that I need to get out of them at the moment. But that is not me by any means trying to undermine the credibility of what psychiatric help can give people. If you feel that's what you need to do to to get yourself in the headspace that like I try to be in these days or beyond that, please do it. Be honest. You must be willing to be honest about your behaviors and commit to changing. That's practically what I'm doing right here. I will never escape the shadow of my past situations if I don't be open about them. You're not going to be living in a positive and cleansed out headspace if you just want to keep hiding your mistakes and running for your mistakes. I want to learn from them. I want to become a better person because of them, but I'm not going to let those situations be the mark I'm going to leave with everybody. We all make mistakes. We have to own up to the mistakes, and we can become better people because of those mistakes. Be patient. Rewiring your brain takes time, so be patient and kind to yourself. Totally agree with that as well. This has been an ongoing thing for me for 3.5 years. Mental health is not something you cure over a weekend. It's ongoing. The big turning point in my life was 3.5 years ago. I'm here 3.5 years later still learning things about myself because of that, as well as other situations. And you have to be patient. You can't put yourself in this headspace where you just want a quick fix. There is no quick fix with mental health. Focus on changing your patterns. The best apology is changed behavior. Absolutely. That's why I choose to be the person I am these days. Even if people don't necessarily want to look at me as a changed person, at least I know I've taken upon myself to be a changed person, because it's not about achieving admiration or recognition from the other people who saw you at your worst. Because a big lesson I have to learn with myself is, hey, there are going to be people, regardless of what I say, what I do, they will look at me and still see me as the dude who made mistakes. Don't own up to those people. Look at the people who saw you at your worst and now look at you now and they give you the thumbs up. Review your successes. Choose a time period to review your successes and where you need to focus more. That kind of goes back to what I was saying, how it's always going to be ongoing. One of the things I've sort of picked up on this as time has gone on is that there's just more and more layers that I can peel back and learn about myself by just analyzing certain moments in my life. You know, when certain people have seen me at my worst and they've turned their backs on me, I mean, there's just so much I can look at that and be like, okay, where are the lessons to be learned there? It's not a matter of, oh, I did a video harassing somebody. Okay, what motivated that harassment? I had these lingering feelings. There was other things going on in my life that was stressing me out. I have Asperger's syndrome. There's no cure for that. That's just something I gotta deal with on a day-to-day basis. But that should not be any excuse for why I can't keep it under control. And I just was not keeping myself in the headspace that I needed to be at the time. But that goes through other facets of my life. I wasn't in the headspace I should have been in when I was in high school. I wasn't in the headspace I should have been in when I was in college. The headspace I'm in these days is better than those headspaces, but it's still an ongoing headspace. And there's still things that I'm picking up from it as we go along. Because I realized that the previous headspaces I was in was turning me into a toxic person. I was a toxic person. I can be honest about that now. Here's another post that I found online. I'm not sure who wrote this. My toxic trait. I don't get over shit. I just get past it. I haven't healed from a lot of things. I've just accepted them for what they are. True. Like I said, healing is an ongoing thing, even to the point that you may not 100% be healed with a lot of those situations. But as time goes on, you accept them. Don't put yourself in this headspace, oh, I'll never get over that. I'll never get over that. I'll never get over that. You will eventually get yourself into a headspace where you can just look at it and be like, hey, it was a life-changing event, but I've gotten the lessons I need out of it and more because it's ongoing. And you will learn to not let those events define you for who you are today. Maybe you can define yourself by the lessons you've learned from those situations, but don't let the bad moments of your past be the legacy you leave behind for yourself. And the truth of the reality is there are people who are going to be toxic towards you whether they think they're being toxic towards you or not. I might still run into somebody down the line who is still going to look at me and see me for the mistakes I made. I hate to say this, but that is toxic. Time changes, people changes, the world changes. Sometimes you have to reach that point where you have to look at the way people are these days. Just to read one more thing that I found online. Just remember, we are all toxic. Every single human being is capable of being toxic, has been, currently is, etc. But some people have the desire to be educated on it and do better, while others will ignore any accountability and continue to act the same way. Pay attention. Now, one of the reasons why that post hits me well is because, you know what, it's sort of a double-edged sword in my case. Let's read the first half of this one paragraph. But some people have the desire to be educated on it and do better. That represents me these days. I have made mistakes. I'm owning up to those mistakes. I want to learn from those mistakes. I want to become a better person because of those mistakes. While others will ignore any accountability and continue to act the same way. That was me 3-4 years ago. That was the person who made that video that harassed my friend. It didn't matter that that person and I weren't friends anymore. It didn't matter. This person was my friend at one point. You don't do an hour-long video harassing your friends, especially if it's a woman. And that big lesson I had to learn that day is you don't harass a woman. Harassing a woman on camera, that's the kiss of death. You do not do that. But I like the idea that we're all toxic to some degree. I'm toxic. People in my family have been toxic. Friends I've had have been toxic. But the thing that I think we all need to learn is you can be toxic and not necessarily be a bad person. I'm not saying you're a bad person by being a toxic person. Sometimes toxic behavior is born out of situations that we feel we are doing for ourselves, that it's for our better nature. I could look at somebody and call them toxic because they don't want to talk to me because of mistakes I've made and they just want to hold me to those mistakes till the end of my days. Nonetheless, I can't really criticize
criticize them for that, because if that's something they feel they have to do for their own best nature, so be it. I've been the same way too. I've run into people from time to time who I don't want to talk to because of certain situations they've been in, but at the same time I also have to admit that's not exactly growth. If I want to grow, I need to start looking at people for who they are these days. Have these people learn from their mistakes? Have I learned from my mistakes? Growth isn't just about what you see in other people, it's also what you see in yourself as well. And it's just peeling back those layers that are going to give you the life lessons you need to be the person you need to be these days. And always keep it in your control. Do not let others control the person that you're going to be. I'll read another thing. Never give anybody enough power over you to bring back the triggered, unhealed version of you when you've worked so hard to become better than that. Exactly. If I want to heal myself and become a better person, I have to be the one who's in control of myself. And I'm not going to change myself to bypass people's negative perceptions of me. I've made mistakes. I've lived up to those mistakes. Let me be who I want to be these days. I didn't choose to change because I wanted people to see me as a better person. I changed because I didn't want to be that person anymore. I wasn't a bad guy who was living under a false persona of a nice guy. If anything, I became a false persona. The person who did that video 3.5 years ago, that was a false persona. That is not me. The version of myself that people, whether it's from people from high school or work or my Twitter crowd who have forced themselves to turn their backs on me, they turn their backs on a fake persona. Another lesson I've been trying to grab onto is the idea that you can't always blame yourself for everything. You're gonna have people who come and go in your life whether you like it or not. And many times it will be through no fault of your own. You're gonna have people who won't like you 2 seconds after they meet you. My former stepdad, I didn't really like him the first time I met him. And that was before I eventually discovered what a jerk he was. It just happens. And there are just certain situations where you don't always have to own up to it. Own up to the ones that you have to own up to. Case in point, a few years ago, one of my coworkers, one who I'm not that close with, but I would speak to them occasionally. But for a time, I was Facebook friends with that person. And about 2 years ago, they blocked me. And then about 3 days later, out of the blue, they friended me on Facebook, which basically tells me that they unblocked me. So I accepted the request, but then a few hours later, apparently they unfriended me again. That's weird shit. I don't feel like I have to explain myself for that. Same thing with this person who followed me on TikTok last year. It was somebody who I actually knew since my elementary school days, who I was for the most part casual with. I mean, I wasn't close friends with them, but I'd been following them on TikTok for a little bit, and then out of the blue, they followed me back last year. But then like literally 2 days later, they blocked me. What did I do in the span of 2 days that made this person block me? You tell me. The shit that I did on TikTok a year ago is the same shit I do now on TikTok. So that's what I'm saying. You don't have to explain yourself to every little person you've met throughout every facet of your life. But that's always been a situation with me over the years. I just apologize for everything, even if it's not necessarily something I have to apologize for. I remember my stepmom used to get annoyed by that. She'd be like, Christopher, stop apologizing. Sorry. Own up to the ones that you're close with and actually appreciate you and respect you and love you and they want nothing but the best for you. Don't own up to the people who decide after 2 seconds it's just not worth having you around. You were a mutual at best. You were a casualty at best. Those are not the people you want in your life. Stop being paranoid. Stop thinking that, oh my god, this person doesn't like me because of that or that or that. It's all connected somehow. You can't be in a clean mental space if that's the way you approach certain situations and people. It kind of reminds me when I started high school. When I started high school, I was very defensive to pretty much everybody because I just come from middle school where people were bullying me. I think I just put myself in this headspace that every person who's like my age at that time is like that. But I quickly learned when I went to high school, no, not everybody is like that. You know what? I should have given some of these people a chance at first when I wasn't. I was just so defensive because I'm expecting the same treatment in high school that I was getting in middle school. Fortunately, that didn't last all 4 years of high school. Yes, I had my defensive moments, but not to the point where like I'm defensive towards literally everybody like I was at the start of high school. And listen, as much as I could say that I was bullied at certain points in my life, I also have to come clean about the fact that I've been a bully as well. The fact that I did that video a few years ago, that's a classic case of bullying. I've gotten defensive towards people I've interacted online. I was defensive towards people in high school. I've been defensive towards people I've worked with. I don't want to be a bully to anybody. I want to be a nice, kind person to people, maybe be a good influence, but I don't want to be this domineering and stubborn kind of guy. I am stubborn, but you know what? I'm trying to get a better grasp on that as well, because I'm also a believer in being too stubborn is going to push people away and they're not going to have any respect for you. I saw this one post on Facebook some time ago and it said, it is your responsibility to control your triggers. It's not others' responsibility to tiptoe around you. 100% true. And that applies both ways. It's not people's responsibility to tiptoe around me. It's not my responsibility to tiptoe around them. When it's your mental health, it's your responsibility. When you're not controlling your mental health, you're going to feel very isolated. So those ideas have really sort of become my mantra, if you will, in the last few years. And it's always ongoing. I mean, listen, there's things I can own up about now that I wouldn't have been able to say a year or two ago. I'm at the point now where I can say that the person I harassed a few years ago, I had some lingering feelings with, but even when I did my apology video, I was still kind of downplaying that. And that's been one of the better aspects to this, because I actually like the idea that I can continue to pull back these layers and see more of myself. I'm the only person I have to live with every day for the rest of my life until I'm not here anymore. If I can't trust and tolerate myself, who can I trust and tolerate? And it's hard. Every day that I think about some of these situations is another day where I have to remind myself I haven't fully forgiven myself. I remember when I did my apology video, I had the actual nerve to say that my friend betrayed
betrayed me. Betrayed me in what way? Because they set boundaries, because they said certain things needed to come to an end for the sake of their own mental health and their own state of mind? That's not betrayal, bro. Doesn't matter what you wanted out of the friendship. That's something they're doing for their own best interest. You have to respect that. Bro, you didn't have a clue what betrayal was. The day I posted that video, that was the day I learned what betrayal was. I not only betrayed my friend and the people who appreciated and liked me in that community, I betrayed myself that day. I learned that it is possible to betray yourself. I learned that it is possible to traumatize yourself. Oh yes, a big lesson I've learned in trauma is that it's not just something that's inflicted to you by other people or other situations. It could very much be your own situation that is going to cause you some type of psychological trauma. And that has definitely happened with me. I am still dealing with emotional trauma as a result of situations that were of my own making. And that all plays into how I said, you know, I don't know if I ever will fully forgive myself, because who knew that I could traumatize myself that much? Will there come a point in my life where I won't think about it as much? I'm sure, but the impact of it will never leave me. But at the same time, again, I don't really want it to leave me, because a lot of what I can say now, I wouldn't have been able to say or think 3-4 years ago. And don't think that I haven't had situations where I'm not able to see it from the other side. Just recently, one of my friends from TikTok made a YouTube channel, but I was talking with this person, and it turns out that the reason they made this channel was they were basically manipulated into making that channel. They had this friend on social media who was just a total manipulator and everything, and basically pushed for them to make that channel. And on top of that, they really only wanted my friend to post these like specific videos, I guess, to get this one other person's attention. And my friend was very upset by that, and they eventually blocked this person. When they were telling me that story, you know who I was seeing in my eyes in that situation? The friend I betrayed 3-4 years ago when I did that YouTube video. My TikTok friend is my friend from a few years ago. The person who manipulated my TikTok friend was me 3-4 years ago. I was completely looking at the same situation from an outside perspective, and it almost choked me up. And I still have moments like that every time it's the anniversary of when I posted that video, because bear in mind, it was 2 days before my birthday. The first year anniversary was not fun because we went up to New York for my birthday, and that was a disastrous birthday. That's another story for another time. But on top of that, the whole day I was just in this sad mood. Not that anybody knew, but I was in a sad mood because I thought, wow, it's been 1 year since I did that video. It's been 1 year since everybody cut me off. Last year, I don't really remember so much. I mean, I know I did a TikTok about it because it appeared in my TikTok memories this year. This year, however, the 3rd year anniversary actually hit me really hard, because the actual morning of, I was laying in bed, I took out my phone, I went on this Discord for this other YouTuber I follow, and the first thing I see in the Discord is a link to a new video from the channel that I used to follow as part of that community. And I just thought, really? I wasn't even a half hour into my day. I wasn't even out of bed yet, and I already felt like I was gonna burst into tears. I felt like that was the powers of be saying like, yeah, don't think that we weren't gonna let you forget what day it was. And that was just a few months ago. So I'm always going to have these lingering emotions in regards to that situation from a few years ago. I'm not looking for those people to forgive me. I mean, you forgive me or forgive me, you don't, you don't. You can't force forgiveness. I said this in my apology video. You can forgive without respecting, but you can't respect without forgiving. And as I mentioned before, there's just several factors at this point for why I just know that those people are never going to talk to me again. That being said, if I had been granted one final opportunity to, at the bare minimum, talk to my one YouTuber friend one last time, I would definitely be for that at some point. I'm not saying it would necessarily be now. I don't know if I'm emotionally ready for that just now, but somewhere down the line, yeah, I don't want the last time we talked to be them screaming at me for shit that was my own fault. If we talked again, we wouldn't be fighting. There's nothing to fight about at this point. I was the perpetrator. I can admit that now. I would like to apologize to them directly, not just in a pre-recorded video, about how sorry I am for everything I did and whatever emotional stress, whatever trauma they went through because of things I did. Not because I want them to forgive me, but because I just feel like I still owe that to them. They not only saw me at my mentally worst, they became the biggest victim of me at my mentally worst. That's something I don't think I will ever fully let go of, and I would love that chance to apologize to them directly. I would like to do that with a few people, but only one person did I ever do a hour-long video harassing them for shit that was my own fault. Yeah, I feel a certain obligation to that one person. Even if that conversation was to theoretically happen, I would want it to happen in a way where it benefits both parties. I'm not trying to benefit myself anymore. I don't want to have theoretical conversations with people who I know don't want to talk to me anymore unless they feel they can get something out of it themselves. Even if they just want to tell me I'm a piece of shit. I mean, first of all, they're entitled to tell me that, but even still, that's another layer I can peel back, and maybe I'll learn another thing about myself that I need to work on. Now, I, of course, have accepted that this theoretical discussion between us would never happen. If they didn't talk to me again after I did that apology video, I can't imagine them wanting to talk to me again in any other situation. And I have to respect that, and I do. I stick with the boundaries. I'm not reaching out to that person anymore or anybody from that community anymore. But yes, in theory, of course, I would like to have one last final conversation with my ex-YouTuber friend. Because at the same time, as much as I'm always going to regret what I did to them, and as much as I wish I feel I could try to give back for everything that I did, if I hadn't done what I did, I couldn't do this video right now. I I wouldn't be conscious of my mental health if I didn't do what I did. I wouldn't have a better appreciation for boundaries if my friend had not set boundaries. That person really helped me put myself in the headspace that I needed to put myself in. In a cosmic way, that person saved my life. I know they will never listen to another word I have to say or care, but I would like to at least have that opportunity to tell them directly, thank you for saving my life. Because at the end of the day, I don't really want to take this situation to my grave. If I have to, I have to. That's karma on me for everything I did. That's not my friend's responsibility. And I know that my friend will never, under any circumstances, forgive me. But if I had to settle for something that is less than their forgiveness, it's just the confirmation that they at least believe what I'm saying at this point. In my current headspace, I could totally settle for, listen, I respect that you've owned up to your mistakes, you're learning from your mistakes, you're becoming a better person because of your mistakes, but nonetheless, I can never under any situation bring myself to forgive you. Fair enough. 3-4 years ago, I would not have been able to settle for that. I was in such a bad headspace that it wouldn't have happened, but nowadays, I could totally settle for that. But it is what it is. But what do I know? Charlie Kirk's wife apparently forgives the guy who killed her husband, which in turn apparently led Tim Allen to being able to forgive the guy who killed his father several years ago. And he even said that if his father hadn't died, he wouldn't be where he is right now. And that's exactly where I've been. If I hadn't done that bullshit YouTube video, even if it was for completely the wrong reasons, at least in retrospect, I can at least say, hey, the life lessons that I wasn't grasping at the time, I now have because I did what I did. You know what you know now, and that's enough. You're never too old to learn things about yourself and to learn the big difference between right and wrong. Even if we have to learn those lessons in the most unorthodox ways. It also goes back to what I said earlier. My friend has their own mental health to deal with. If interacting with me, even if it's one last time, is going to conflict with their own mental health, I have to respect why they would never want to pursue that anyway. You don't pet the dog that bit you, especially if the dog bit you several times, and unfortunately I'm guilty of that. Anyways, just a few more things before I start wrapping this up. There is one area of the video that I did a few years ago where I harassed my friend that I didn't actually touch upon in my apology video. Not because I didn't necessarily want to, or it just didn't occur to me at the time. It was just, it's a very delicate subject, and because I knew I was trying to be cautious with the things I was saying up to that point, that I just felt it was probably best to not touch upon it, but I'll finally touch upon it now. In the video where I harassed my friend, I called them a liar. Part of the decline of our friendship was because of lines that I had crossed within the friendship. And when I called them out in the video that effectively ended my time within that community as well as Twitter, I said, well, this person accuses me of crossing lines when you know they've lied to me for 2 years about this and this and this and this. But now that time has passed and I've looked back on it further, if anyone was ever to ask me, well, does that also mean that you are now convinced that your friend did not lie to you? So here's where this part of the video is going to get a little touchy. The truth of the matter is my friend did lie to me. And before anybody wants to think I'm taking a step backwards here and want to come at me with pitchforks, hear me out. I have a different reason for saying that this time. The reason I brought up that point 3.5 years ago was as a pathetic attempt to defend myself for things that I did. The reason I'm bringing it up this time is as a form of defense on their part. My friend didn't have a choice at that time but to lie to me. And I don't want to hear anybody say, oh, there's never a choice to lie. Friends don't lie. If that person was your real friend, they wouldn't have lied to you. If you understood where I was with myself mentally at the time, you would have lied to me too. I was so far gone. I was such a clingy friend. I was such high maintenance at the time. I was an insufferable friend, a disrespectful friend, a dishonest friend. We've all been guilty of being dishonest and lying at some point in our lives. Being dishonest is as much a part of life as being honest is. In fact, you really can't learn the true value of honesty unless you've been dishonest. And if anything else, that's also another reason why I've tried to make being honest a major priority to myself these days. Being honest was a priority before, don't get me wrong, but when I was in these bad mental states, I could definitely look back now, even though I was convincing myself I was being fully upfront and honest. No, I was actually very much bending the rules at the time. Which brings up other points, like for instance, when I was making my apology video, I knew that regardless of what I said in that video, there's always going to be that high chance that nobody believes what I say or even cares. But that should not stop you from being honest about everything. In those kinds of situations, it can go one of two ways. I could either tell the truth and they'll just call me out on bullshit because they don't believe me, or number two, I could just lie and they'll see through the lies, and either way I have to admit to myself that I was bullshitting. I would rather tell the truth and nobody believes me, so that way when my time comes, at least myself and the powers that be know I was telling the truth. It sucks when people don't believe you when you're telling the truth, but at the same time, when you have to bullshit your way through life, eventually that's all going to settle in and you have to admit to yourself that you're a bullshitter. In my opinion, that's a much worse feeling. So yes, my friend did lie to me, but they didn't have a choice. I would have been lying to me too if I was in their shoes. That's actually another thing I wish I could apologize to them for. Not only that they lied to me, but that I actually put them in a position to have to lie to me. That's another thing I don't think I'll ever fully forgive myself for. Listen, we're all going to meet people in our lives who just lie to our faces, but when it's like people in your family or people you consider close friends, to have to put people like that in positions to have to lie to you, that's a very difficult pill to swallow. And that is another thing on the long list of things I wish I could make up to them. that person. And to a lesser extent myself. Because if I put them in that position, that's a betrayal to myself as well, because that's not the person I was trying to establish myself as. But whatever. For me, that's always going to be an ongoing situation in terms of my mental healing. Even though I miss talking to the friends I had on Twitter, I honestly don't think that these days I would have a Twitter anymore. I just feel like Twitter's been getting a bad rep in the last few years. I mean, not that I've been on it, but just like from what I see about it in the media, it doesn't seem like the kind of place I would want to be these days. But I mean, I could give you a long list of situations in regards to what I feel will benefit my mental health and what doesn't benefit my mental health. And if you're going to ask me, like, what are other areas where I feel I've seen definite improvement? Well, let me give you an example. I lost 2 of my cousins within 5 years. One died back in 2020. The other one died at the beginning of this year. I even did a video on my channel in regards to his death. Both were young. The one who died in 2020 was 28. The one who died this year was 35. What also makes it more tragic, my aunt, their mother, died over 20 years ago at roughly the same age that the cousin who died this year was. But where does this play in with my mental health? When my cousin died back in 2020, I was in such a different place mentally at the time that I don't think I was grieving their death in an honest way, if that makes sense. Like, I went to the funeral, I was feeling the emotions, but like it wasn't really sinking in with me at the time. Whereas the cousin who died this year, that one actually hit me. Not because like I was closer with him than the cousin who died a few years ago, but I think because these days I'm in such a different headspace than I was 5 years ago, that when my cousin died this year, that actually kind of caught me off guard. And when he died, the thing that was actually hitting me more about it is my uncle, in the span of 23 years, lost his wife and 2 out of 3 of his kids. And the third child, my youngest cousin, she lost both her siblings and her mother. I remember the day before my cousin's funeral this year, I went right up the road here, because right at the bend down the road here, across the street, is the house that they lived in when I was younger. I recorded a video of that house on my TikTok, and as I was walking back, I just did a whole spiel about how I was just thinking about 3 out of the 5 of that family is gone. And the 3 who died young. That's just tragic. It's just like, talk about a broken family. And I've had other people in my family who died in the last few years. I mentioned my one grandmother dying last year. One of my grandfathers died about 2-3 years ago. And I've processed those deaths in different ways. I guess in a way you could say I have a sort of easy way of processing death. Not necessarily easy, but it doesn't take me long to just accept, hey, it is what it is. When someone dies, you can't do anything about it. They're gone. Especially if it was situations that was beyond anyone's control anyway. I think that's why like the situation I put myself in 3.5 years ago is still very relevant with me now, because I know that there was things about that I could have changed. But because I have to accept the situations for as they are, at this point it's just like, it is what it is. I'm getting the life lessons out of it that I need, and I'm grateful for that, even though there's so much of it I wish I could still change. And this is not like some desperate ploy for me to like reconnect with people. Listen, this is a situation that goes beyond people just forgiving me. And I'm in a different mindset these days now where it's just, I don't know if I would want to be engaged in that anyway. Which more or less brings me up to the present. What am I mostly doing with myself these days? Trying to keep my feet on the ground, trying to assess what I want to really do with myself. I don't want to stay with my job forever. What career do I want? I don't really know. I could give this YouTube thing a try. I would like to get involved with doing short film projects again. In fact, when I went to the re-release of Jaws the other month ago, the dude who was working at the concession stand is one of my friends from college. He's been at that theater for a long time. But he and I were in a film club back in college. He and this other dude that we went to college with, we were doing like these little short projects a few years ago that kind of got put on hold, partly because of the pandemic, partly because of other things. I said to him, like, yeah, it's so sad that like our film group kind of dissolved and everything. I mean, I definitely don't think the pandemic helped, and he said yes, it definitely did not help. But we also agreed, like, hey, maybe we'll try to reignite this somehow, get the guys back together, maybe we'll do some film projects again, who knows. I am actually in a place in my life where I am not necessarily excited, but at least optimistic for what my future has to hold. As I said earlier, every day I wake up is a reminder that my story's not over. There's going to be more events that are going to take place in my life, both good and bad. I couldn't be where I am if I didn't have a past, but I shouldn't let the troubles of yesterday make me apprehensive about the events of tomorrow. And at the same time, I'm just constantly focusing on myself, just trying to keep a clear head, try to stay positive, just be honest with myself. If I make mistakes along the way, I hope to learn from them, and hopefully it'll shape me into a better person. Who knows? I'm not really pursuing any relationships right now. I'm more focused on me. I mean, that's actually a big change with me these days. There was a time where I would be like desperate for like a relationship, even though I could look back and be like, you were nowhere near the mental state of mind to be in a relationship with anybody. These days, I'm definitely in a state of mind where if I'm going to be in a relationship, I want to be in a clear head. I want to mature myself. I mean, listen, is anybody really mature? I mean, I think we've all been immature at various points in our lives. And there's something else I want to add to that too. One thing that I have learned that I don't have to be sorry for is being a socially awkward person. I practically embrace the fact that I am a socially awkward person. I just found it best for myself to develop my own interests, even if I'm the only person I can really share it with. Because at the end of the day, you can take any little thing in the world, regardless of how big or small it is, or how meaningful or meaningless it is, someone in the world will find that interesting. I have a lot of interest that I know is not going to gain a lot of
interest from a lot of people, but I don't care. I am who I am. Does it come off socially awkward at times? Yes, it does. And when I have these weird situations that are born out of my social awkwardness, I will apologize for that. But for being at heart a socially awkward person, I don't have to apologize for that. But I don't want things like that to complicate a relationship, which is why I'm definitely waiting until I feel now is the time where I can commit and be the best partner I can be in a relationship. Like, this is the first time in years where, like, I don't have, like, a quote-unquote crush right now. And I want to become a less apologetic person. I mean, listen, there's times to apologize, there's times to not apologize, but don't feel like you have this constant need to apologize for everything. I'm at the point now where I just say I'm sorry once, and then I just walk and I just say it's out of your hands at that point. If apology 1 didn't do anything, then apology 6, 7, 8, and 9 are probably not going to do anything either. And as I said, I consider my journey a survival story. All the decisions I'm making these days in terms of my mental health is really about survival. When you're not keeping your mental health in check, your chances of survival in the real world are not going to be good. And when I have to constantly keep asking myself, what do I really want to do with my place in the world? I think the real thing that I want to do is just survive.